I stopped at a gas station during a road trip. The clerk told me something I'll never forget. I never thought I'd survive to tell this story, but here it is. After driving for a few hours, my friend Steve and I stopped at a gas station. It was quite the desolate place, with neon lights illuminating a parking lot with no cars and no people. To the left and to the right, nothing but road for miles and miles. There was a single gas pump. I parked my van between faded white paint and looked back at Steve before going inside. Want anything? Marlboro, obviously. When I entered, I was hit by a foul odor, and the clerk was nowhere to be found. I went down the snack aisle and picked up a few things. This was the second stop during our road trip, and I'm not sure if Steve noticed, but with every stop we made, the places became more and more empty. It was like we were driving towards the edge of the world where there was no one. This place, this stop, was like the final level in a way. I slapped my items on the counter and tapped a rusty old bell for the clerk. I could see Steve growing impatient in the passenger seat of the van. He needed a smoke, and honestly, I did too after driving with him for hours. Sir, that startled me. Hey, just these, I said. The clerk scanned my items while eyeing me up and down, like I was a mysterious newcomer to town. He looked out the glass entrance and noticed my friend in the van eyeing him too. You guys heading down that road? Huh? His question caught me off guard. Lots of people head down there about this time of year, camping and whatnot. Just be careful now. Thanks, I said. Appreciate it. Also, get me one of those cigarette packs back there. Any is fine. The clerk towered over the counter, and I had to look up when I spoke to him. I know it's common, especially at gas stations, for employees to stand on top of something behind the cash register to make themselves look taller so as to intimidate potential thieves. But that wasn't the case here. When he walked from around the counter to place a wet floor sign, he was just as tall. Okay, he said. That'll be $11.35. After I paid, he put my things in a plastic bag for me, and we bid each other goodbye. Be careful, he said just as I was making my way out the door. You got it, I replied. His expression turned sour. I'm not joking, boy. Be careful out there. As if that didn't unsettle me, he added, and whatever you do, never ever, under any circumstances, pick up a hitchhiker. Those people out there on the road, putting their thumbs out, they ain't what you think, boy. They just ain't. When I finally got back out to the car, Steve was out taking a pee, near the dumpster. He rushed back to the van, got inside, slammed the door shut, and yelled at me to hurry up and drive. Wait, what happened? What did you do, you idiot? I said. The clerk was chasing our van, and I could see him waving in my rearview mirror. He seemed really, really angry, and it probably had something to do with what Steve did. He got me taking a piss out of the back of the store. Steve giggled. And you couldn't just walk inside like I did to use the bathroom? We drove for another few hours down the road, but I just couldn't forget that clerk. His face and his voice and his stern warnings, they were stuck in my head. Matt, you okay? Steve asked. Yeah, why? Did something happen inside that store? That old clerk was tall, wasn't he? When he started chasing me, I had to run with my pants still around my knees, he was so fast. I paused before answering. Well, yeah, he was a little weird. He seemed concerned for our safety, actually. Said to never pick up a hitchhiker. Aw, Steve began sarcastically. Thanks for the advice, old man. Like we're stupid enough to do something like that. Right? I agreed. For the next few hours, we drove down the road in peace, and there wasn't a single hitchhiker in sight. I'm hungry, said Steve. It's 2 a.m. and we just ate a few hours ago. Yes, Matt, he quipped. We consumed gas station food. That's not real food, okay? Fine, I'll stop the car and we'll find a place to eat. Why? What do you mean, why? You just said you're hungry. Yes, but all you need to do is stop the car. Just park right over there. You don't need to look for a place to eat. I was confused. So you just want me to park the car and then what? We have to find a diner or something, you idiot? No, we don't, Matt. Okay, then you're fine with eating the gas station food I bought, the one you literally just complained about. Because that's all we have in this car. What are you talking about, Matt? He said. There's plenty to eat in this car. My mind went back to the store clerk. The last time I saw him when I was pulling out of the gas station, he was waving his arms in the air. He looked afraid for us. I doubt he was angry just because my idiot friend vandalized his walls with urine. No, that clerk looked utterly and sincerely afraid for me. I looked back to Steve, who was glaring at me. He put his fingers over his eyelids and slowly pulled his face off like the mask that it was. that wasn't Steve. It grinned at me. Never pick up a hitchhiker. Alright, putting on my English major hat for this video, that was a pretty solidly written story. Classic start, a nice establishing of things. I just wish there was more. I would have loved the tease of a different hitchhiker, Steve acting suspicious, stuff like that. But hey, there are far worse criticisms than wanting more of something. There's an entity called the Adeep. Whatever you do, don't try to summon it. Michael? Yeah? Have you heard of the Adeep? And that's when it started. There was an air of skepticism in my response, as Larson had himself a track record of exaggerations and sometimes outright lies. I paused briefly. No, and I have a feeling you knew that, Larson. We were in my aunt's kitchen, Larson's mother. I shuffled downstairs around 9 in the morning, my nostrils taking in the smell of sizzling bacon and coffee beans turned liquid. Larson was already seated at the table reading some book. Horror, no doubt. I could feel his blank stare. Well, don't you want to ask me about it? He said. Sure, Larson, tell me all about him. It, he corrected me. Aunt Flora slapped 2 yellow pancakes onto Larson's plate. Michael, how do you like your eggs, honey? Actually, I'll just have pancakes too, please, I replied. I waited for Larson to begin his story, but he was busy squeezing syrup and spreading butter on his breakfast, not waiting for it to cool down so that the butter wouldn't melt onto his plate. I'll tell you later, he finally replied to me with his mouth full. I hated when he did that. No, not talking with his mouth full, although I definitely hated that too. I hate when he brings up a subject that he's obviously passionate about, and when I finally give in to his nonsense and express interest, he decides to move on to something else. He did that so I'd beg him to tell me more, as if I'm the one who'd brought it up in the first place. Yeah, I hated that. Pretty smart, though. The next day, on a freezing night, Larson and I went camping. It took me about 30 minutes to start a fire, but it wasn't my fault. The yellow-orange flames crackled between our faces. The fire's warmth slowly brought down my eyelids in a gesture of subconscious relaxation. I dared not move my head too far from the crackling fire, for every time I did, the night's ice-cold air would sting against my face, reminding me that I wasn't actually out camping in the woods with my cousin Larson, but instead we were in his parents' backyard. We should do this more often, man. I love these scary story nights, said Larson. My eyes shifted to the left and then back to his illuminated face. This is literally our first one. He looked embarrassed. I know that, he replied, but I just know it's going to be fun. That's about the only thing he and I bonded over. We consumed anything and everything horror. It began in middle school and continued into high school, and I was sure one day that we would be telling each other dark tales in our college dorm, too. Larson scooted his chair to the left so that the fire between us wouldn't obscure his view of me. And then, in that backyard, he finally told the story he didn't finish telling me last morning. The Adeep is a spirit. That means it has no body or face that can be described. Oh, perfect, I quipped. How convenient for the people who made this up. Larson paused, sitting back in his chair, glaring at me. Can you not interrupt? I lowered my head and raised both my hands as if to surrender. Sorry, go on, I smiled. Like I said, it has no actual body, but that doesn't mean you can't see it. For whatever reason, it can choose to manifest physically. And you know what else? Larson asked. I raised my eyebrows and leaned in closer as if interested, but my sarcastic mannerisms didn't amuse him. But Larson leaned in closer too, the fire brightening his face and reflecting within his eyes. It's said that the people who the Adeep has chosen to reveal itself to die moments later, sometimes mere hours later. They died when they saw his face, Michael. And how did they die? I asked with a more serious tone. They killed themselves. So let me get this straight, yeah? I began. I readjusted myself in the uncomfortable lawn chair he provided me and crossed one leg over the other, just to bother him. You said earlier that no one has ever seen the Adeep because it's a spirit or whatever, but it can sometimes manifest itself physically so that you can see it, and those people who the Adeep, for whatever sick reason, decided to reveal itself to, committed self-termination later. For whatever reason. I'm assuming you mean to say that they were so terrified of what they saw that they couldn't take it anymore. Is that right? Everything I just said? Larson paused a moment before nodding his head, his brown medium-length hair jiggling. You don't see a problem with that, Larson? How do we know that these people saw its face, and how do we know that's the reason they killed themselves? Because, Michael, he sassed back at me, He leaned forward again, coming even closer. One of the victims gouged their eyeballs out, scooped them out of their sockets like vanilla ice cream. And another left a note behind talking about how they couldn't unsee the face of the Adip and therefore decided that they didn't want to see anything at all. I paused before answering him. Why vanilla? And, okay, there's more than one problem with what you just said, but I'll let them go. But why gouge their eyes out when they were going to end their lives eventually? Did they really think that they could continue living after that or something? Larson was irritated by these lawyer-esque questions. He simply wanted to tell a good old creepy story after all. He wasn't having my nonsense. He made a deep sigh. Well, I don't know, Michael, but I do know that there's only one way to find out, so I guess you'll have to see for yourself. Oh, I see what you did there, I yelled excitedly. We shared a laugh at that under the night sky, and it lightened our mood. A week later, Larson and I found ourselves in his parents' backyard again. It was a warmer night, he told a few stories, and so did I. And admittedly, his were better than mine. Scarier, that is. I scrolled through my iPhone. What about this one? Let me see, Larson said, his eyes looking up from his own phone. Nah, horror mode sucks. Their stories aren't that good. I looked down in shame, but took some relief in the fact that he had no idea it was my username, especially learning his opinion on my stories. So, how do you summon the Adip anyway? I asked suddenly. Larson smiled as if he was waiting for the moment I would bring it up. He faced his iPhone down on his lap and gave me his full attention. Well, it's said by who? I interrupted. Who says these things? I chuckled. Larson waited out my little rant like waiting out a storm. You done, Michael? It's said that the way people summon the Adip is by telling its story. It shows up to the person telling it and to the one listening. But it doesn't always show up, just like it doesn't always reveal itself physically to people. And thank God for that, right? I rolled my eyes. Right. Larson looked over at his swimming pool, whose vacuum sprayed the occasional whip of water like a spitting snake. I watched it too. And, as my ears took in the gentle sound of the towering dark trees as they danced at the breeze, I realized something. Wait, hold on, I began. You said that the way to summon the Adip is by telling its story. That's one way to do it. It's been said, but isn't that what you just did? I interrupted him. Larson's gaze fell into the fire, his body frozen. I smiled. And yet it's not here, is it? I told you, Larson, it's nonsense. But he looked absolutely petrified. Larson? I said concerningly. He looked back up at me. Oh God, oh crap, oh crap, oh God! Calm down, I said. You honestly believe you summoned the Adip? Calm down, man. I want to go back inside, Michael. Okay, fine, go ahead. I'll be here enjoying this fire. The one that took me half an hour to start because You need to come inside too, Michael. This is no joke. My lips parted and my mouth hung very slightly open. Are you serious? It's only 11 p.m. You really want to go back inside right now and waste another Saturday? It's our only time off before school starts again. Please! Yelled Larson. Right now, please! We headed back inside and went straight to sleep. For Larson's comprehensive knowledge about the Adip, it was sure funny how he forgot the most important piece of information about it. But that was Larson for you. Funny. Only he could and would make a mistake like that. He scared himself to sleep, but I, on the other hand, slept like a baby. I didn't believe any of it anyway. Until Aunt Flora, Larson's mom, called our home crying to my mother. Her screams were so loud and so piercing that my mother had to move the phone away from her ear. It was even audible from upstairs, and for a moment it seemed like the phone would crack open. Aunt Flora's cries were so loud. I heard her tell my mother over the phone that Larson had hung himself. Hours later, after Aunt Flora spoke with the cops, my mother brought her over to our home. Flora spent the night kicking and screaming on our living room floor, her face as red as a tomato. My mother couldn't understand what Flora did next, but I could. She didn't know what it meant, but I did. Aunt Flora, while still crying on our living room carpet, made repeated gestures with her hands. She kept pointing to her eyes, but couldn't utter a single word over her own tears. My mother just shook her head in confusion and cried with her, but I knew what she meant. She was telling my mother that she caught Larson trying to do something to his eyes, days before he hung himself. But he was unsuccessful there because the police never mentioned anything about his eyes. It makes me think that the real reason he ended his life is because he was too afraid to take his own vision, to actually physically do it. But he had to do something. Larson had to do something because he saw the Adeep. He had to do something just like the other victims had to do something about what they saw, whether it be to blind themselves and then end their lives later having realized the situation they put themselves in, or to knock on death's door immediately after. And now here I am, writing this. This has made a firm believer out of me, that's for sure. And I've lost much sleep since it all happened. But how could I sleep anyway? How? Because Larson said that the one way to summon the Adeep is by telling its story, and that's when it shows up. It shows up to the one who told it, and to the one who listened. Larson also said that it doesn't always show up, but with him being gone and all, I'm not sure how much faith I have that it won't come for me next. So now I wait, lying awake at night and gazing at my bedroom ceiling, afraid of what happens next in this story, afraid of what I might see. Well, Michael, real nice. You just told the story to us, so now we're all gonna get Adeeped. All in all, a little slow moving at first with some needless drawing out of things. I'm all for taking time to really set the mood, but I feel like we waited a little too long to get to the interesting bit. And then the payoff was definitely sad, but we need more. It's like you stopped playing a horror movie before the tension is actually broken with a scare. So, dear narrator, you might be afraid of what happens next, but I think the rest of us would just appreciate knowing what happens next, because this is barely an Act 1. You definitely have some talent for description and have some solid writing basics, but you've written a trailer, not a movie. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.